Welcome back, guys. In today's episode, I'm sharing 8 true disturbing stories about cults in the Appalachian Mountains. Someone heard a voice whisper 36 right before a masked figure came down the stairs. And another guy saw a circle of people chanting in the woods with a woman on her knees blindfolded and shaking. So make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, share this with your friends, and let me know where you're watching from. Thanks. Now let's get into it. I'm Travis. I work as a warehouse supervisor out in Pittsburgh. It's a decent gig, but it's non-stop. Long shifts, constant calls, always some last-minute crisis to put out. So when I finally get time off, I don't want to see anyone, talk to anyone, or even hear my own name. I just want quiet, real quiet. That's why I rented this place. A 2-story cabin way up in the Appalachian Mountains. No neighbors, no traffic noise, no Wi-Fi. The listing just showed a gravel road winding through dense trees until it stopped at a narrow wooden house. That was enough for me. It looked like the kind of place where time just didn't matter. I left on a Friday morning, threw a duffel in the back of my old Civic, and hit the road. Music up, windows down, nothing on the schedule. First couple hours were smooth. But somewhere past the 3rd hour, middle of nowhere, the car jerked hard like I hit something, then the engine cut out. No sputter, no slow warning, just dead. I coasted to the side of the road near a bend where pine trees boxed me in and the shoulder looked like no one had parked there in decades. The check engine light blinked once, then went black. I sat there for a second, half expecting it to magically fix itself. Then I tried the key again. Nothing. Not even a cough. I pulled out my phone. No signal. Not even a flicker. Just a little no service in the corner, like the phone was mocking me. I got out and popped the hood, which didn't help because I don't actually know what I'm looking at when I do that. I was just standing there, swearing under my breath, when I heard a car. It was coming slow, real slow. A beat-up old sedan groaning up the hill, dragging itself around the bend like it had something to prove. I stepped back, half hoping they'd just wave and pass. But they didn't. The car passed me, then immediately slammed into reverse. Loud, grinding noise. I flinched. The window rolled down painfully, slow like it was fighting rust. An old woman sat behind the wheel, white hair pulled tight into a frizzy ponytail, face creased like old paper. Her scarf was wrapped so thick around her neck I couldn't tell if it was for warmth or support. She looked at me for a long second before speaking. "You all right?" No. Car died. I'm headed to a rental house up the mountain." She didn't say anything, just kept looking at me. Her eyes were watery but sharp. Felt like she was scanning my face, like she was trying to figure out if I was lying. "You know the place?" I asked. "It's supposed to be near the ridge, medium-sized, kind of narrow." She paused. "You're going there?" I nodded. "Yeah, just for the weekend." Still nothing for a second. Then she looked forward, like she was debating something. Finally, she muttered, "I'll take you partway." I should have asked more questions. I should have just said no. But standing there with no signal, no plan, and the woods closing in, it felt better than doing nothing. I grabbed my bag and got in. The inside of her car smelled like boiled cabbage and old laundry left in the wash too long. Windows were fogged, and every time the car creaked or the brakes whined, I held my breath a little. We didn't talk for a while. She just drove, slow and steady, eyes on the road like it was more dangerous than it looked. Then, after maybe 10 minutes, she asked again, "You said the house at the top?" "Yeah." She stopped. Just slammed the brakes. Middle of the road. "Out." I blinked. "Wait. What?" She didn't look at me. "I ain't taking you past here. Get out." Her hand stayed on the wheel. No motion, no explanation. It wasn't a question. So I opened the door, climbed out, and before I even shut it, she took off. I turned to say something, but all I caught was her taillights disappearing around a bend. So I walked. The gravel road started narrow and kept getting narrower. The trees leaned in closer the higher I went, like they were trying to block the path. No signs, no forks in the road, no sound except my boots crunching and the occasional crack of a branch somewhere deeper in the woods. By the time I saw the house, my legs were killing me and I was sweating through my shirt. It sat there at the end of the road like it had been waiting. Long porch, wooden steps sagging in the middle, windows dark and closed. No car in the driveway, no footprints. Just that house and the trees. Inside it was weirdly clean, not cozy, just cleaned. The kind of clean that felt staged. Couch was a little too stiff. Books on the shelves looked untouched, like someone had placed them there just to fill space. Kitchen smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. Upstairs had 2 bedrooms. I picked the one with the newer mattress, dumped my stuff, took a shower, and tried to relax. The first night was dead silent, not even bugs. Around 1:30 a.m., I was still awake, flipping through an old magazine I found, when I heard it. Help me, soft, just above a whisper, like someone pressed their mouth against the wall and whispered straight through. I froze. My first thought was plumbing, old pipes, creaking wood, maybe something outside. But it didn't sound like that. It sounded human. I waited. Nothing else came. I stayed up for hours just listening. Nothing. The next morning, I did a full lap around the property. Behind the house, there was a narrow trail that vanished into the trees after maybe 20 feet. Looked like no one had walked it in years. There was a shed near the house too, with a rusted-out lock and this thick, oily smell leaking out from underneath. I thought about breaking it open, but something told me not to. That night, around the same time, help me, same voice. Same weird, calm tone, but this time it was behind the living room wall. I stood there holding my breath, trying to figure out if it was coming from inside or outside or underground or I don't know. Then came the footsteps. Upstairs, real footsteps, heavy, pacing. I hadn't been up there since the afternoon. I grabbed the fire poker and crept up one stair at a time. My hands were shaking and my mouth was dry. I checked every room. Closets, corners, behind the shower curtain, nothing, but I swear I felt something, like I wasn't the only one doing the watching. The next morning, I woke up with scratches, 3 thin lines down my left forearm. Not deep, just enough to sting. I stared at them for a while, trying to come up with any explanation that didn't involve me being asleep in a haunted house. But nothing added up. Bed was fine, no bugs, no nails sticking out. I don't even have long nails myself. That afternoon, I was brushing my teeth in the upstairs bathroom when I saw him. In the mirror, a figure standing in the hallway behind me. Tall, masked. The mask looked like carved dark wood, smooth, polished, no mouth, just thin slits for eyes. I spun around. I checked the hallway, nothing. I even looked under the bed like an idiot, still nothing. That night, I didn't sleep. Just sat downstairs with every light on, bag packed by the door. I kept telling myself I'd leave at first light, just wait it out. No point running into the woods in the dark, but around 3 a.m. I heard it. Footsteps upstairs. Heavy, slow, then a voice, not a whisper this time. Clear, deep, 36. My skin went cold. That word stuck in my head like it meant something. Something bad. Then he came down the stairs, not walking, gliding, masked, shoulders hunched at the wrong angle, head tilted like he was studying me, like he was deciding something. I didn't wait. I grabbed my bag, tore the door open, and ran. Outside was pitch black. No moon, no light, just the crunch of gravel in my own breath. I ran until I saw the outline of my car again. Still dead, still cold. I jumped in, locked the doors, and sat there in the dark until sunrise. Once I made it back to town, I went online. Tried to look up the house. The listing? Gone. Completely wiped. No record. Like it was never posted. But on a paranormal forum, I found a post from 5 years ago. Title was Blood House on the Ridge. Same place, same porch, same layout. According to the post, a guy once lived there, early 30s, no real job, claimed he'd been visited in dreams by a demon. said it promised him immortality if he gave it 36 human sacrifices. Started with his mother, then his sister, then 33 others, locals, drifters, hitchhikers, all inside that house. The police raided the place after someone escaped and tipped them off. Gunfight broke out. The guy and 6 other cult members were killed, but they only ever found 35 bodies. No one ever found number 36. Some folks said he was just a lunatic, that the whole cult thing was made up. Others said people still heard the whispers saying 36. When my cousins and I would head up to my aunt's place, nestled deep in the Appalachian foothills, the place was as secluded as it gets, like a forgotten pocket of the world where time seemed to move slower. The town nearby was tiny, almost invisible, tucked between thick, untamed woods that gave it a sense of being lost in time. The trees were so dense that even on the brightest, sunniest days, the sunlight could barely squeeze through. The whole place was constantly in a state of shadow, as if the sun could never fully touch the ground. We didn't go there all that often, but when we did, it felt like something new always happened. My aunt had married a guy from that area, one of those mountain men whose family had been rooted in the hills for generations. He had this quiet, stoic way about him, the kind of person who didn't say much unless he had to. My aunt, well, she was a little different too, a little quirky. She'd always been fascinated by the local history, the stories, and the culture of the place. Their house, though, oh man, that place was something else. It had been built by his family and it showed. The house was ancient, creaky, and had this strange feeling like it was part of the land itself. You could see it in the sagging foundation, the crooked walls, and the faded, strange tapestries hanging everywhere. It wasn't the kind of place you'd expect to find in a picture book or a tourist brochure. There was a strange, unsettling quiet to the house, even during the day. But at night, when the wind picked up, when the shadows stretched out, it felt like the atmosphere shifted. The air thickened. It felt like the house itself was breathing, like something inside was awake, waiting. It was hard to explain, but you could feel it in your gut, deep down. It started off slowly, the sounds at first. Just some creaks and pops, the kind you'd expect from an old house. But then it didn't feel like the house was settling. The sounds started to feel deliberate, like someone was walking around upstairs, pacing back and forth, slowly, methodically. I remember one night I was alone in the living room, lying on the couch. The others had either gone upstairs or were out in the garden. The house was quiet, save for the occasional crackle of the fire in the hearth and the gentle creaking of the beams. And then it started. Heavy footsteps, slow, deliberate. I froze, hoping it was just in my head. But the sound came again. 2 heavy thuds followed by a pause and then another. My heart started to race. I waited, hoping it was just one of the kids or maybe my aunt. But when I went to check, the upstairs was empty. The house felt colder then, and quieter too, like the air had thickened, pressing down on me. It wasn't a breeze. It wasn't a draft. Just a heavy weight in the air that made it hard to breathe. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was moving through the house when I wasn't looking. The worst part? I couldn't explain it, and that made it even worse. I didn't mention it to anyone at first. I didn't want them to think I was overreacting, but the next morning I couldn't help myself. I asked my cousin Emma about it. She was the one who'd spent the most time at the house, the one who'd lived there with her parents before moving out. She had to know if anything strange happened around here. Emma, though, just gave me this look, like she knew exactly what I was talking about, but didn't want to say anything. And then, without missing a beat, she said, "Oh, that's just the walking man." She said it so casually, like it was the most normal thing in the world. You'll get used to him. I didn't ask for any more details. At that point, I didn't know if I even wanted to know. But of course, I couldn't shake it. The walking man. What did that even mean? What kind of person, what kind of thing was she talking about? And over the next few days, the sounds didn't stop. If anything, they grew louder. Every night I'd hear the creaks, the footsteps, and whispers. Sometimes I'd hear scratching, like nails dragging slowly across the wood. It was always just out of sight, but it felt real enough to make me question everything. One evening, we were all outside around the fire pit, roasting marshmallows and chatting. That's when I noticed something strange. Barefoot tracks, big ones, large, heavy prints left in the grass near the garden. They didn't look like they belonged to any of us. They were too big, too heavy. At first, I didn't say anything, but when the others came over to look, we all realized the prints led from the edge of the garden right up to the back door. But none of us had been near the garden that day. Then, just as quickly as they appeared, the tracks disappeared. They stopped at the tree line, right at the edge of the woods. It was like the person who'd made them had just vanished. There was no continuation, no sign of anyone else. I couldn't explain it, but a chill ran down my spine. The woods beyond the garden were dark, thick with trees. They felt wrong, like they were holding on to something, some kind of secret. Later that night, Emma came to me, whispering like she didn't want anyone to overhear. "You saw the tracks, didn't you?" she asked, her voice low. I nodded, not sure what to say. "I've seen them before," she whispered. "The people who walk the woods at night. They're always watching." I didn't really understand what she meant. It sounded like something from a ghost story, something made up to scare kids. But the way she looked at me told me she wasn't joking. She wasn't trying to scare me, she was warning me. And that feeling of unease, that gnawing feeling in my gut, only grew stronger. The house became more oppressive after that. The footsteps grew louder, the whispers more frequent, and we started to see things. Figures moving just outside the trees, always just out of sight, always too far to make out clearly. But there was something about them. Sometimes they just stood there staring, and other times they moved, but their movements were off, jerky, unnatural. One night, just past midnight, we were sitting outside again, and that's when I saw them. Figures. Pale, shadowy shapes, moving along the tree line. They didn't walk like normal people. Their movements were stiff, almost like they were wrong. It was like watching a puppet being pulled on strings. They didn't cast any shadows in the firelight, but I could see them, standing just beyond the trees. My heart started pounding, my breath caught in my chest. "What the hell is that?" Ian whispered, his voice barely a sound. I couldn't answer. I didn't want to know what it was. But then one of them turned slowly, deliberately, and looked at me. I'll never forget it. For a split second, I saw its face, pale, empty. Its eyes were wide open, black as coal. And then, as quickly as they appeared, they were gone. The shadows melted back into the trees, vanishing like they'd never been there. We didn't speak for the rest of the night. We just stayed by the fire, too terrified to move, to even breathe. The next morning, I had to ask Emma again. "Who are they, the ones we saw last night?" She looked at the woods for a long time before she spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "They're the ones who come when the moon is high," she said. "They walk the woods, looking for those who know too much. They've been here for generations, watching." That was the moment I realized that everything about this place, everything about the house, was wrong. It wasn't just old, it was ancient. And the people here had secrets, things they'd been keeping for far too long. We should have left that moment. We should have packed up and never looked back. But we didn't. We stayed, and that's when we found the shack. It was deeper in the woods than any of us had ever gone before. We'd been exploring, looking for something to do, when we stumbled upon it. At first, none of us noticed it. It was so well hidden, buried behind a thick veil of vines and trees. But then, as we got closer, we saw it. A little shack, small, old, weathered. It was barely noticeable, like it was trying to remain hidden from us. We walked toward it, almost drawn to it by some invisible pull. The door creaked as we pushed it open. The air inside was damp, cold. There were strange symbols carved into the walls, deep, jagged marks, like they had been made with something sharp. The floor was covered in dirt and debris, but in the center of the room was something far worse. An altar, a crude stone structure covered in waxy remnants of candles long burned out. It felt wrong. The air was thick around it. And then we saw the stains. Dark, red stains. Fresh. I felt something cold on the back of my neck, and then I heard it. A whisper, low, guttural. It was enough to make us turn and run. We didn't look back. We didn't say a word to anyone. We packed up and left that day. We never returned. I haven't been back to those woods since. Some places are better left alone. Some things should be forgotten. I mostly take jobs from small developers who are looking to buy up cheap land in the middle of nowhere. I like the work. I'm out in the woods most days, alone, with no one breathing down my neck. I don't mind being off-grid. If I can hike, measure, and get paid without dealing with people, it's a good day. Last October, I got a job scoping out some overlapping land parcels near the North Carolina-Tennessee line, deep in the hills. This one developer, never met him, just dealt with his assistant, wanted to see if these plots could be consolidated for a cabin resort or something. The maps were a joke. Xerox copies from the 1000, 970 STFs, baited lines, handwritten notes in pencil. And out there? GPS was unreliable at best. Cell service? Forget it. I drove most of the day to get there, rolling into a little town called Grafton around 4 p.m. My buddy Jason had a friend, Marcus, who owned a small off-grid cabin nearby. One room, no running water, solar battery barely holding a charge. I wasn't expecting comfort. I just needed somewhere to sleep while I marked the lines. Marcus said the place hadn't been used in months, but the door wasn't locked, and the key was taped to the propane tank. Seemed normal enough. I dropped my pack inside, checked the time, 4:20 exactly, and figured I had a little under 2 hours of light left. Enough time to scout the southern boundary before sunset. I took my gear and headed out on foot. There was a thin, winding trail heading south. It looked more like a game trail than anything, but it was walkable. The woods were thick, maples, oaks, underbrush curling around my ankles, but not hard to move through. I dropped flags, took a few photos for orientation, made mental notes where I could. About an hour in, something strange happened. I stopped because I heard a sound I couldn't place. Not animals, not rustling leaves. It was voices, rhythmic, low, almost like a song but slower, repeating syllables. Human for sure. I stood still and listened. The sound was drifting up the slope from farther ahead, just beyond where the trees started thinning out. I thought maybe it was a group of locals. Maybe someone's weird backwoods drum circle, or hikers doing something ceremonial. I'd run into groups like that before. Kids singing folk songs, older folks with guitars around a fire pit. I didn't feel alarmed yet. I kept moving, quieter now. I didn't want to interrupt anything. 15 minutes later, I reached a clearing. There were no fences, no signs, but the space had clearly been prepped. All the leaves had been swept or raked away, leaving bare, packed earth. In the center was a ring of flat stones, maybe 10 of them, each spaced evenly around a dark pit, like a fire ring but deeper and wider. Way too precise to be natural. I crouched low behind a fallen log just inside the tree line. The bark was damp and crumbling, but it gave decent cover. I could see the whole thing. There were around 20 people in the clearing, standing in a circle. No lights, no fires. Just the gray light from the dying sun. They looked normal. Jeans, boots, jackets. A few wore flannel or windbreakers. One guy had a John Deere cap. But their faces were painted, white, chalky X's over their mouths and foreheads, like they'd smeared thick, white paint across themselves with 2 fingers. In the middle of the circle, there was a woman on her knees. Her hands were bound behind her back. She was barefoot. She wore jeans and a white tank top soaked in sweat. A red cloth bag covered her head. She was trembling. The group was chanting. I couldn't make out the words. It wasn't Latin or anything I recognized. The way they spoke, slow, deliberate, repeating in sync, it felt old, like something passed down in whispers. My chest tightened. I didn't move. Then someone stepped out from the ring. He was older, bald, gray stubble, lean but strong looking. No shirt, just a denim vest. He carried a curved blade, long and narrow, like a farming sickle or a machete someone had bent into a hook. It looked sharp, clean. He raised the blade slowly above his head. The others dropped to their knees, one by one. The chanting stopped. There was this sudden vacuum of sound, like everything was holding its breath. I couldn't even hear birds anymore. He walked over and pulled the bag off the woman's head. She looked mid-30s, pale skin. Her face was soaked. Her mouth was moving like she was trying to speak, but nothing came out. Her eyes weren't crying. They were wild. She looked like she was trying to find something, focus on anything. The man crouched in front of her. He touched the blade gently to her cheek, not cutting, just resting it there, like he was measuring. She didn't scream. She didn't struggle. She just closed her eyes. And that's when I stepped back. I wasn't trying to be dramatic. I just shifted my weight. And my boot hit a twig. Snap. Not a loud crack. But in that dead silence, it was deafening. Every single head turned. 20 people and the woman all turned toward the tree line at once. I dropped behind the log so fast I scraped my shoulder on the bark, pressed myself into the dirt. My heart was hammering. I couldn't hear anything over it. Then, footsteps. Multiple sets. Running. Branches snapped. Leaves crunched. They were circling the clearing. Fast. Someone ran by 10 feet from me. I could see the edge of a boot through the ferns. I held my breath. Then the woman screamed. Not in fear. Not pain. It was anger. He's watching, she shouted. Her voice was raw but clear. He sees it. He'll carry it. My blood went cold. Another voice answered, a man's, deep and loud. Find him. I ran. I didn't even think. I just exploded out of the brush and sprinted uphill. My gear slammed against my back. Branches tore at my clothes. I didn't care. I didn't look back. I ran until my legs gave out, and then I crawled. When I reached the cabin, I slammed the door shut, dropped the door, and cut the lights. I sat in the corner with a knife I kept in my pack. Just waited. I didn't hear anything. No footsteps, no knocks, no voices. Just silence. It lasted hours. Around 2 a.m. I checked my phone. No service. GPS icon kept spinning. Nothing worked. I didn't sleep. When dawn broke, I packed up everything. Didn't eat. Didn't bother checking the site again. I walked until I found the highway. My legs were shaking. I was covered in scratches. A farmer in an old F-150 picked me up and gave me a lift to town. He asked if I was okay. I said I got lost in the woods. That was it. When I got home, I emailed the developer and told them the land was unstable, the terrain was too dense, and the project wouldn't be viable. I sent fake notes. I refused the payment. I'm 31, and I used to do pest control, mostly roaches and the occasional raccoon in an attic. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid decent, and I didn't mind the work, at least until that summer in 2022. It was one of those hot, sticky days where your shirt clings before you even get in the truck. I walked into dispatch, and instead of the usual tablet with the route, the manager handed me this crumpled piece of paper. Handwritten. Looked like it had been folded and unfolded 100 times. I even asked, "You serious with this?" She just shrugged and said, "It came in by mail, no contact info, just an address and a short note. Rodents in the basement. Bring traps." The name on the form was J. Trather. Never heard of them. And the address was way out in Boone Hollow, somewhere in McDowell County. I'd done jobs in McDowell before, but this one was out past anything I recognized. Usually I can at least plug the address into GPS, but this time it cut out about 2 miles before I got there. No signal. All I had was a sketched out map on the back of the form, like someone traced it from memory. The landmarks were, let's say, unconventional. Dead oak, rusted mailbox, broken gate, no street names, just vibes. I followed this gravel road that eventually turned into a dirt one, winding along a ridge with a steep drop on one side and dense trees crowding the other. I kept thinking I missed a turn, but the map didn't offer many options. Eventually, I saw the gate. It was crooked, barely hanging on. One hinge had completely popped loose, and the whole thing leaned like it wanted to fall but couldn't quite commit. There was no mailbox, no address marker. Just the gate and a dirt path leading down into the trees. I idled there for a second, engine humming. I had that little knot in my stomach you get when something just feels off. But again, pest control sees weird stuff. I've walked into houses where the floor crunched from roach shells, where raccoons slept in cribs, where guys kept pet rats in cereal boxes. This was just another weird address. That's what I told myself. I followed the path through the gate. It dropped into a kind of bowl surrounded by trees, like the house had been dropped into the woods and the woods had swallowed it part way. 2 stories. Paint peeled off in huge curls. What was left looked like it used to be green but had faded into a sickly gray. The windows upstairs were bordered with rotted plywood. And the door? All around the frame were wooden crosses nailed in. Some upright, some upside down. One had a dried chicken foot tied to it with red thread. Another had nails through it like a miniature crucifixion. I've seen people hang weird stuff to ward off snakes or ghosts or whatever, but this was on a whole other level. I knocked once, waited, knocked again, louder, nothing. Then I noticed a paper nailed to the door frame. Just one line, scrawled in thick black marker. Basement entry around back. Do not disturb. Right, because that's not sketchy at all. Still, I walked around the side. The house didn't have a normal backyard. No grass, no fence, no signs of life at all. The dirt was packed and uneven, and someone had hammered wooden stakes into the ground in a row, maybe a dozen of them, each one topped with a skull. Raccoon, fox, cat, I think, all bleached out. Past those, the trees started to climb again. Between the trees were lines of fishing wire strung back and forth, almost invisible until I got close. Bits of bone, mostly tiny ones, maybe bird or rabbit, hung from the wire, swinging and tapping against each other like a creepy wind chime. The basement door was sunk into the hill, metal, rusting, with a bolt across it. I hesitated, just for a second, then undid the bolt and pulled the door open. It groaned, loud and high, the kind of noise that makes you flinch. The air that came out was damp and earthy, with that old dirt and mildew smell. I stepped inside and flicked the light switch. A single bulb clicked on, buzzing, barely enough to light the room. It was cold down there. Not cool. Cold. Like a crawl space in midwinter, even though it was pushing 90 degrees outside. The basement was almost empty. Bare stone walls. Dirt floor. But in the center of the room was a ring of rusted tools. Old hand saws, hammers, sickles, all arranged in a perfect circle. Inside the ring were burlap sacks. And in the far corner there was a hole dug into the ground. It was shallow, maybe 2 feet deep, but wide, 6 feet across at least, and the bottom was lined with dolls. Dozens of them. Not the plastic kind, these were homemade. Cloth bodies, button eyes, tangled yarned hair. Some looked burned, others were falling apart. All of them were arranged in a spiral, their heads all turned slightly inward, like they were watching something that wasn't there. I stepped inside and called out, "Mr. Trather?" My voice echoed too loudly. It hit the stone walls and came back too clear, like there wasn't enough air to muffle it. Then the door slammed shut. It sounded like a gunshot. I jumped and turned, already running for the handle. Locked from the outside, I slammed my fist on it. "Hey, hello? I'm in here." No answer. And then the singing started. High and thin, a woman's voice, not warm. Cold and slow, like she was singing through her teeth. The sound came from above me, from somewhere in the house, and it started to move. I could hear it drifting across the ceiling, room by room. The melody wasn't anything I recognized. It had this rhythm that was almost a lullaby, but the notes were wrong. It felt backward, like the whole thing was being sung in reverse. Pressed my ear to the ceiling. The voice was circling. The words didn't sound like English, maybe Appalachian or some old mountain dialect, but twisted. There were too many vowels. It reminded me of a church hymn played on a broken record player. Then it stopped, just like that. No footsteps, no movement. Then a whisper, low and right behind me. "You came for the rats." I turned. A section of the ceiling split open, just cracked, and something dropped through. A man, tall, bare, covered in carvings. His chest was marked with symbols I didn't recognize, some scarred over, others still bleeding. His face was streaked with something black, maybe ash or old blood. His eyes were red at the edges, but his pupils were pinpoints. He stared straight at me and didn't blink once. He smiled. Then 4 more followed him. They didn't climb, they dropped, like gravity didn't apply. 2 had burlap sacks over their heads. 1 held a red candle, wax dripping onto his wrist. Another carried a bow saw. It already had stains on it. They moved in a slow circle, surrounding me without saying a word. I backed toward the pit. I couldn't think. I just reached down and grabbed the nearest tool from the ring. A hammer. The first one lunged. I swung as hard as I could, caught him in the jaw. I heard something crack, and he collapsed, gargling. The others didn't even pause. The one with the candle crouched and unrolled a little black bundle on the ground. Inside were human teeth, strung together with black thread in the same spiral shape as the dolls. That's when I ran. I ducked and sprinted toward the door. One of them grabbed my shirt, fingers like steel, but I twisted out and shoved him into the pit. He screamed, and then I heard nothing. I threw myself against the basement door. Once, twice. On the 3rd hit, the bolt snapped. I exploded out into the backyard, sprinting, heart in my throat. I didn't look back. I tore through the woods, crashing through branches. Something sharp cut my arm. My shirt caught and ripped. I kept going. I could hear something behind me. Twigs snapping, maybe footsteps, maybe not. I didn't care. I ran until I saw gravel and headlights. An old pickup slowed down. The driver, this older guy in overalls, didn't say a word, just opened the door and stared while I climbed in, bleeding and shaking. I didn't file a report. I didn't go back. Dispatcher figured I'd quit. I let her. On the way home, I tossed the form out the window. Gone. A month later, I got curious. I looked up the spot on satellite view. Nothing. Just trees. No house, no clearing, not even a road. Like it had never existed. I'm a mechanic from Knoxville. When I was 26, I made a really dumb choice. It kicked off with this unexpected phone call from my Uncle Ray. He lived way out in the Appalachian backwoods, like beyond cell service, mail doesn't get there deep. I hadn't talked to him in a couple years. Out of the blue, he tells me I've been working too hard and I need to realign. That's the word he used, realign. Now, when I was a kid, I thought Ray hung the moon. He was one of those guys who could fix a busted generator with a spoon and some duct tape. Kind of a legend in our family. So I said, yeah, sure. I figured a break sounded good. I tossed some clothes in a duffel and drove north. The last gas station before the woods looked like it hadn't sold anything fresh since the Clinton years. Half the lights were out, bags of chips all bleached out from the sun, broken ice machine out front. I asked the guy working there if he knew how to get up to Crowskin Ridge. He looked at me like I'd said something filthy. Didn't say much, just muttered, Ain't nothing up there. Well, he was wrong. There was too much up there. The road turned into a gravel path about the width of a shopping cart. No signs, no houses, just trees squeezing in from both sides. I kept checking my phone until it finally gave up and dropped the signal. After maybe an hour of slow creeping, I hit a clearing. Ray's place looked like someone had lost a bet with gravity. 3 cabins, all leaning in weird directions, like they were embarrassed to be standing. The biggest one had a deer skull nailed above the door, yellow, white, and cracked down the middle. Ray came out wearing this torn-up camo jacket and grinning like we just bumped into each other at a bar. "You made it," he said. "Good." He hugged me like we'd seen each other last week. Beard grayer, arms thinner, eyes just a little off, like he'd been living in a different calendar. That night, he grilled something tough and gamey. Tasted like regret. I didn't ask what it was. As the sun went down, a group of people showed up. 8 of them. 5 guys, 3 women. Nobody introduced themselves. They just nodded, like I wasn't exactly expected. Sat in a circle by the fire and passed around a big clay jug like it was some sacred ritual. Ray handed it to me and said, "Just a taste." It smelled like expired meat and gas fumes. I pretended to take a sip and passed it along. Then I told him I was beat and ducked out early. Ray had set me up in one of the other cabins. Just one room, no windows, a cot that felt like sleeping on a sack of bricks, and an old kerosene lamp with barely a flicker of light. I locked the door, dragged a chair under the knob, and laid there staring at the ceiling. Then I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. I held my breath. Tried to tell myself it was just a tree branch. Then it came again. Same pattern. I got up real slow, walked over, peeled back the curtain just a little. Nothing, just trees. But something moved. Fast. Human-shaped maybe, but wrong. Pale and quick, slipping between trunks. I let the curtain fall and backed away. Didn't sleep a second. Just laid there, holding my pocket knife, waiting for the sun. Next morning, Ray acted like it was any other day. Told me he wanted to show me something. Said it was older than the mountain. We hiked up a steep trail that felt like climbing stairs made of roots. At the top was this clearing. Dead center, a big flat black stone about the size of a pool table. The thing was covered in carvings, circles, weird hook shapes, a lot of eyes. Burn marks stretched out from it like veins. Ray stood beside it and said, "This is the mouth." I snorted, thought he was joking. "The mouth of what?" He gave me this look like I should already know. "It speaks of hunger. It remembers our names." Then he ran his fingers over the carvings and said, "We feed it." I didn't say anything, but my stomach turned a little. That night, same setup. Fire going, group sitting in a circle, mumbling low. They passed the jug. I kept faking it. One of the women leaned over and whispered, "He's strong. It'll take longer." I stood up and said I was heading to bed. Ray stopped me with a hand on my shoulder. "Tomorrow's important," he said. "Don't wander." I nodded like I was cool with that, but I didn't go inside. I circled around and crouched behind the cabin, watching. They dragged someone into the clearing. A man, tied up, head covered with a burlap sack. They laid him down like an offering. Ray knelt beside him, pulled out this black knife, jagged and shiny like obsidian, and made these careful cuts across the guy's chest and arms. Then he used these bundles of sticks to brush the blood onto the stone. The guy didn't scream, just twitched. I backed away slowly, then bolted once I was far enough. Didn't stop till I was behind my cabin, heart pounding. Didn't sleep again, just waited. As soon as Ray left the next morning, I packed fast, got to my truck and climbed in. Tried the key. Nothing. Dead silent. Not even a click. I checked everything. Battery, wires, fuses, all fine. Tried again. Still dead. And I looked up. One of the women, Cricket I think her name was just standing on the trail, not moving, just watching. I slammed the hood shut, grabbed my pack and took off. No plan, just ran. Picked a direction and followed a stream bed. Slipped on some rocks, cracked my shin, tore my jacket, but I kept moving. About an hour in, I started hearing them behind me. snapping branches, whistling. This deep, awful horn that made my ribs vibrate. I dove into a dry ravine and slid under a fallen log, stayed still. Footsteps came close, real close. Then I heard Ray's voice. He's close. He's ripe. They kept moving. I didn't move till the sky went dark. Then I followed the creek until I hit a logging road just before dawn. Waved down a truck. Driver didn't ask questions, just dropped me off at a diner in Grafton. I didn't call the cops, didn't tell anyone, didn't even tell my mom. I didn't want anyone digging into it. I'm a wildlife biologist. I was 31 when I took an assignment out in Eastern Kentucky. It was supposed to be simple, a solo survey, just me, the woods, and a checklist. Track deer movement, monitor any bear activity, report back. 3 weeks, mostly deep forest, mostly on foot. They dropped me off near a spot called Boone's Ridge. No cell reception out there, so I had a solar-powered cabin and a satellite phone for emergencies. A forestry ranger gave me a lift in a battered pickup, handed me a paper map and said, "Stay on the paths. This place don't like surprises." That was the last time I saw another human for almost a week. The first few days were uneventful. Honestly, kinda nice. Hikes, trail cams, GPS logs. I set motion cameras in tree hollows and near old salt licks. Collected scat samples, checked for signs of feeding or bedding. The terrain wasn't friendly. Steep ridges, thorny underbrush, sudden drops. But I'd worked worse. Eastern Kentucky forests are dense, but if you move slow and pay attention, they open up. By day 6, I'd settled into a rhythm. Up at dawn, hike a few miles, check traps and cams, back by dusk to catalog everything. Legs sore, boots muddy, nothing out of the ordinary. Until day 7. That's when I found the deer. It was in a shallow dip between two ridgelines, a good half-mile off the trail. I smelled it before I saw it. Metallic, sweet, and wrong. At first I figured bear kill. Happens more often than you'd think, but once I got closer, I knew something was off. The ribcage was spotless, like it had been boiled. Skin stripped away in long, even pieces, and the cuts weren't ragged like claws or teeth. They were clean, surgical. I walked around it slowly and spotted the skull, placed carefully about 6 feet away, facing west. Underneath it, someone, or something, had hollowed out a square of bark, shaped almost like a ceremonial bowl. Inside was a black liquid that smelled like blood mixed with something acrid, almost like battery acid or ammonia. I didn't touch it, just took photos, marked the GPS, and walked backward out of the clearing. I didn't like the feeling in my gut. It wasn't fear exactly, more like someone tapping their fingers on the back of my neck. That night, I sat in the cabin flipping through the photos. Zoomed in on the bark bowl, the placement of the skull. It looked ritualistic. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but something about the precision unsettled me. I left my GPS unit running so it could sync and upload data to the agency server. I didn't sleep much. The next morning, I checked the GPS log. 2 of the trail cameras weren't pinging anymore. I strapped up and headed for the nearest one. The path was rough, steep incline, loose gravel, but I made decent time. When I got there, the camera was gone. Not knocked down, gone. The bungee straps had been sliced, not torn, sliced. The tree where it had been mounted had something carved into the bark, a circle with 3 vertical lines slashed through it, like a crude eye or some kind of symbol. That's when I started to feel it, that watched feeling. Not paranoia, not imagination. Like someone was standing just out of sight, holding their breath. I hiked back faster than I meant to. Kept checking over my shoulder. Didn't sleep that night either. On day 9, I went to check the second offline camera. Same deal. Yanked down, mount broken. The camera was nearby, but the memory card was gone. Just plucked out, like someone knew exactly what to take. I used the satellite phone to call my contact at the agency, Mara. I told her I thought someone was in the forest messing with my equipment. She told me not to confront anyone, offered to send someone to retrieve me. I hesitated, told her I'd think about it. The truth is, I didn't want to leave yet. Not because I felt brave, more like I needed to know what was going on. That night, I was brushing my teeth at the cabin sink when I heard voices, low, rhythmic, male and female. I killed the lights and crouched by the window. I stayed there for almost an hour, just staring into the dark, listening. The voices faded like they were moving away, but I never saw a single shape. In the morning, I checked the perimeter. No boot prints, no broken branches. Just quiet, too quiet. On the door handle was a plastic bag. Inside was the missing memory card. I went inside and plugged it into the laptop. Every file had been wiped, except one. 14 seconds long. It was a still shot of the cabin, my exact cabin. The timestamp was 2:47 a.m. just after I'd gone to sleep. In the footage, someone stood at the tree line, robes, a mask. Just standing there, watching. I started packing immediately. Left the rest of the cameras, grabbed food, my knife, the satellite phone, and started hiking out. I knew the ranger station was 14 miles north. I planned to make it in 2 days, maybe less if I kept pace. About 4 miles in, I came across a trail I didn't remember. Narrow but clearly used. The leaves were trampled, the path smooth. I paused. Checked my map. It wasn't listed. Not on the GPS either. I should have turned around, but I didn't. Maybe I was desperate. Maybe part of me thought it might be a shortcut. So I followed it. The trail dipped into a hollow overgrown with rhododendron. Branches brushed against my arms, leaving scratches. The air felt heavy, still. Then I heard the drums, soft, slow, almost like a heartbeat. I crouched behind some brush and crept toward the sound. In a clearing below, maybe 30 yards away, I saw them. A fire burned in the center. Around it stood maybe 24 figures, all in robes and masks. Bark, bone, feathers, each mask different. At the center, someone knelt, head bowed, not tied up, just still. One robed figure raised a hand. Everyone else dropped to their knees. The drums stopped. The kneeling person looked up. Their face was painted red, their mouth sewn shut with thick black thread. I saw it glint in the firelight. One figure stepped forward, knife raised. I didn't wait to see more. I ran, didn't care about noise. Crashed through branches, stumbled over roots. My legs burned. I didn't stop until I couldn't hear drums anymore. Even then, I kept moving. That night, I camped on a rock ledge, halfway up a ridge. I didn't make a fire, just chewed jerky in the dark and tried to stay alert. I must have drifted off, because I woke up to footsteps. Careful, measured. I held my breath, knife in hand. Something moved at the edge of the trees. A figure in robes, a mask, holding something in their hand. They didn't come closer. They just stood there. I stayed frozen until the sky lightened. By morning, they were gone. I didn't stop again, just hiked straight through to the ranger station. When I got there, the door was locked. I banged on it until someone opened up. I must have looked half dead. Mud covered, cuts on my arms, dried blood on my sleeve. I told them I was done. Didn't give details. They drove me out. I turned in my gear, kept the memory card. A week later, I mailed it to myself. Registered, sealed it inside a safety deposit box in a bank I'd never used before. It's still there. I haven't watched it again. The agency still emails me sometimes, field survey openings, new assignments. I don't answer. I live in a city now, no woods, no trails, no wildlife. I'm a land surveyor. Been doing this for over a decade now. Most days, it's pretty straightforward. Hike into some remote area, take measurements, log coordinates, snap a few photos, and head back. Nothing glamorous, but I enjoy the solitude and the predictability. That's why what happened last October still messes with my head. I got this freelance gig through an email. No company name, just someone called J. Harper. They offered a generous payment up front to map out a tract of undeveloped land in eastern Kentucky. No permits, no detailed instructions, just survey the perimeter. GPS mapping, nothing more. It was supposed to be a 2-day job, tops. I drove out to the location, parked off a gravel forestry road, and started the hike in. The GPS coordinates led me through dense woods, no trails except for a couple of overgrown ATV tracks that didn't go anywhere. I'd worked in this region before. It's a patchwork of abandoned coal land and old family plots with faded boundaries. But about 5 miles in, I noticed something odd. There was a path. Not a game trail, but a real path. Narrow and overgrown, but it had a deliberate curve to it. It didn't show up on any of my maps, not even the USGS overlays. Still, the coordinates pointed through it, so I followed. The woods got denser, then suddenly opened into a clearing. Not open space, just a compressed ring of trees enclosing a smaller interior circle. In the center were standing stones, about shoulder-high, spaced evenly, arranged in a perfect ring. Each one was carved with symbols, crudely, like someone had hacked them in with stone tools. Spirals, hooks, no straight lines. Some were weathered, others looked fresh. I'd seen fake stone circles before, art projects, kids messing around, but this wasn't playful. There were no signs of foot traffic, no beer cans, no garbage, just silence and that ring. I snapped some photos, pinned the location, and was about to leave when I spotted something on the back of one of the stones. 3 letters scratched in newer grooves. V-E-L. It didn't feel like initials, it felt like a name. I hiked another mile before stopping to make camp. Basic setup, small fire, tarp tent, 1-night kit. I ate cold jerky and went over my notes. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Just weird local history. Around midnight, I heard movement. Not a bear. I've heard bears. This was soft, uneven footsteps, bare feet brushing leaves. I shut off my headlamp. The sounds didn't stop. They moved around me in slow circles, always just far enough away to stay unseen. Then, after what felt like an hour, total silence. At first light, I checked the perimeter. No tracks. But inside my tent, just above where I'd been sleeping, someone or something had drawn a spiral on the nylon with charcoal or soot. Same shape as the stones. I didn't eat. I just packed up and started back. That's when the forest changed. The trail I'd followed in wasn't the same. Landmarks were wrong. Trees I remembered were missing or twisted. A stump I'd passed the day before was there, but facing the other direction, like someone had rotated it. My GPS showed me off course, even though I hadn't turned. I started getting that tight feeling in my chest, like something had gone very wrong and I couldn't admit it yet. And then I smelled smoke. I followed it, not thinking, just needing to find another person, a ranger, anyone. The trail opened into a wider clearing I hadn't seen before. At the center was a small cabin. No power lines, no solar, just blackened logs and a tin roof, half rusted through. The door was open. Inside, the place was spotless. No dust, no cobwebs, just a table, 3 chairs, a cast iron stove, and shelves, wall-to-wall shelves lined with glass jars. Identical shape, identical labels. Each one written in red ink with a single date. Not names, not contents, just dates. One jar had the date I'd arrived in the woods. There was a sound from the back room. A soft creak, then a voice, low and rhythmic, like someone chanting. I backed out, but as I turned to run, 3 figures were standing at the tree line, naked, ash smeared from neck to ankle, heads shaved, eyes fixed on me like they'd been waiting. The tallest one lifted a hand and made a slow spiral motion in the air. I didn't speak, I just ran. They didn't chase me, not fast. But every path I took, I'd see one of them ahead, standing still, not moving, just watching. I tried doubling back. I tried cutting straight through brush. I ripped open my legs on thorns and still ended up back at that ring of stones. By then it was past noon. I forced myself to sit, rest, think. The woods were wrong, like they looped or turned in on themselves. I'd mapped terrain like this before. There were no cliffs, no valleys to confuse the GPS, but nothing lined up. I sat there until nightfall. I didn't make camp. I just sat, staring at the stones, clutching the flare gun. At some point, I fell asleep. When I woke up, I wasn't alone. They were standing around the stone circle, 6 of them this time, same ash markings, same blank faces. One by one, they stepped forward and laid something at the center of the ring. I couldn't see what. Then they stepped back and knelt. None of them spoke. They just started humming, low and flat. I stood slowly, lifted the flare gun, and fired straight into the air. The sound cracked through the woods like a whip. The red light bathed everything. The humming stopped instantly. Then the trees opened. I mean that literally. The brush that had blocked every path bent away, revealing a narrow corridor leading out. At the end, I saw the edge of the gravel road. I didn't question it. I ran until my lungs felt like they were tearing apart. A beat-up Chevy pickup stopped when I stumbled onto the shoulder. The driver asked if I'd fallen off a trail. I told him I was surveying land and got lost. He said nothing, just drove me to the nearest diner with a phone. When I got back to town, I checked my gear. The GPS file was corrupted. Every photo I'd taken was blank. My phone, which had died inexplicably in the woods, was back at 63% battery. I looked up Vel. I found nothing. No folklore, no history, no religious references. That job never made it into my report history, and I never took another contract again. I'm a park ranger, been doing it for over a decade now, and I cover this remote part of the Appalachian Trail down in Southern Virginia. Most hikers skip this stretch. It's tough to get to, the terrain's a mess, and it doesn't offer much in terms of views or campsites. We call it Section 7. It's the kind of place you only go if you don't want to be found. I've been assigned to Section 7 for about 8 years. Quiet most of the time. But last fall, something happened out there that still messes with my head. I almost walked away from the job entirely. It started with a call from state dispatch about a missing couple, Adam and Rachel Doyle, early 30s from Pittsburgh. Their families hadn't heard from them in 3 days. They were supposed to check in after a weekend trip, but nothing. Last confirmed sighting was them entering near Milford Ridge, just past the old Hollow Creek Fire Tower. That tower's been out of use since before I started. I drove out early that morning, let my station know I'd be off the grid for a while, and took the Ranger truck up the old service road until it ended at the locked gate. From there, I hiked in solo. I've done that trail so many times, I could walk it in my sleep. Everything was routine for the first few miles. A few downed trees, a squirrel nest that had taken over a signpost. Around mile marker 38, you start seeing remnants from back when the Civilian Conservation Corps had camps up there. Crumbling stone foundations, moss-covered logs, nothing that's been maintained in decades. About half a mile past that, I found their tent, or what was left of it. It wasn't just torn, it was shredded. Fabric was hanging like ribbons from the poles. Zipper looked like it had been peeled open. I've seen what bears and wildcats can do to gear, and this wasn't that. It looked deliberate, like someone had yanked it apart with a purpose. No blood, no signs of a struggle, but all their stuff was gone. Sleeping bags, packs, even their water filter. Only thing left behind was one hiking boot, sitting outside the tent like someone had just stepped out of it. I marked the GPS and kept going. After about another 2 hours of hiking deeper in, I started noticing things that didn't fit. Carvings on trees, triangular symbols, all pointing downward. Not scratched randomly either. These were clean cuts, deep and even, like someone had taken their time. Then came the bundles. I came across the first one near a dry stream bed. It was a stick figure, maybe a foot tall, tied together with dried vines. Looked like a crude little person. At first, I thought it was some kid's art project or maybe a weird trail marker. But then I saw another, and another. 6 in total, just spaced out along the trail like breadcrumbs. Each one had something tied to its chest. One had a tuft of blonde hair. Another had a tiny baby sock. One had what looked like a cracked pair of reading glasses right where the heart would be. I don't rattle easy, but I didn't like it. That night, I stayed in one of the pop-up shelters the Forest Service keeps stashed along the remote paths. They're basically canvas shells with a cot and a heater if you're lucky. I kept my knife in hand the whole time. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to this sound. Soft footsteps just outside. Crunch, pause, crunch. Like someone was circling the shelter, one slow step at a time. I didn't move for what felt like 10 minutes. Eventually, I got up enough nerve to unzip the flap. There was nothing there, except another bundle. It was placed right at the entrance, like a gift. Same stick figure shape, but this one had a strip of paper tied to the chest. I unfolded it. It was a piece of my own trail map. The section I'd been hiking was marked in red ink. I hadn't marked it like that. That next morning I packed up fast. I tried to radio in. Nothing. I switched to the emergency band. Still nothing. That's not normal. Even in the worst valleys, I can usually raise someone, even if it's scratchy. I figured I'd give it until noon, then double back. At 11:47, I came around a bend I swear never existed before. I know that area. Walked it dozens of times, and this wide clearing was just there. Maybe 70 feet across, flat as a football field. Dead center were the missing hikers. Adam and Rachel. They were standing upright, not moving, facing away from me. Naked. Just standing there. I called out. No answer. I stepped closer, and that's when I saw there were more. At least a dozen people, maybe more. All stripped, all standing with their backs to me. Motionless. It didn't even look like they were breathing. And the weirdest part? Their faces. Blank. Not injured or messed up, just wrong. Eyes were open but flat, like they'd been painted on. No movement, no reaction. I started backing up. I didn't say a word, just eased away, slow and steady. I was maybe 10 steps back when I heard it. "You're early." The voice came from the center of the group. I didn't see anyone's mouth move, but the voice was deep, almost calm, like it had been expecting me. I turned and ran, didn't even think, just bolted, made it about 30 feet before I slammed into something. A net or wire strung low across the path knocked me flat. As I scrambled up, I saw him. A man, maybe mid-50s. He stepped out from the trees wearing a full deer skull as a mask, antlers and all. He carried a tall wooden staff with animal bones hanging off it like wind chimes. He raised one hand and spoke again, same voice. "You're not part of the pact, but you'll carry the mark." That was it for me. I got up and ran, hard. I don't remember how far or how long. I just kept moving until I hit a shallow creek I recognized and followed it downstream. It took hours, maybe 6 or more, but eventually I made it back to the road. My truck was there, but all 4 tires were slashed clean through. I drove on the rims until I got a cell signal, called it in, told dispatch I'd gotten turned around and needed a tow, kept it vague. Next day, a team went up with me. We found the shredded tent. That was it. No clearing, no bundles, no people, no sign that anyone had ever been there but me. I didn't mention the group, I just said I'd gotten off course and probably scared myself more than anything. The team didn't ask questions. A week later, I found a box outside my apartment door. No return address. Inside was a single-stick bundle, tied tighter than the others with red twine. In the center was a scrap of dark blue fabric. My ranger uniform. I was 24 when I got this weird freelance contract to survey a bunch of undeveloped land parcels in eastern. It wasn't glamorous. Most days I just walked around overgrown lots in the middle of nowhere, dropped pins on a GPS, and marked old property lines with flagging tape. The counties hadn't updated their records in decades. Some still used paper maps with coffee stains and hand-drawn notes in the margins. But it was decent money, and I didn't mind the quiet. I grew up just outside Lexington, in one of those towns where you could hear a dog bark 5 blocks away. Silence didn't bother me. Each parcel sort of blended into the next. Rusted barbed wire, crushed beer cans, old hunting blinds that looked like they were held together by duct tape and prayer. If you've seen one abandoned stretch of Kentucky hillside, you've seen most of them. The real dangers were practical. Ticks, copperheads, and the occasional old-timer with a double barrel who thought no trespassing applied to everyone, permit or not. I learned pretty quickly to walk slow, call out loud, and keep my hands where folks could see them. The land that screwed everything up wasn't even on my original docket. I was parked off a gravel turnout near Breathitt County, halfway through a sleeve of peanut butter crackers, when my supervisor, Tom, called. He was in his usual half-bored, half-panicked mode, asking if I could check out a claim they found stuffed in the back of a filing cabinet. One of those, "oh, crap, we forgot this existed" situations from the 80s. The location dropped into a no-man's land off Elkhorn Creek. No structures listed, not even a real address, just a faded X on a survey map and a note that read, "Possible coal site, verify." The next morning, I drove out. The access road was barely a suggestion. 2 tire tracks through weeds, canopied by trees that looked like they were trying to shake hands overhead. I passed a single residence, a sagging trailer surrounded by broken lawn chairs, old tires, and enough plastic flamingos to warrant concern. No one waved. No one looked up. About 2 miles in, the gravel gave up. The trail turned into deep ruts filled with muddy runoff and creeping vines. One sharp rock scraped the underside of my truck just enough to make me flinch. I parked by a dry creek bed, slathered on some bug spray, and hiked in with my gear. My boots sank into damp leaves. The woods were quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Maybe half a mile in, I saw what I thought was an old mining site. Kentucky's full of those, and usually they're nothing more than scattered timbers and beer cans. But this one was different. The stone foundation was still mostly intact, which is rare. Some charred wood beams stuck out of the ground like broken ribs. I found a rusted hinge and a few bent nails near what might have been a doorway. A fire pit sat a few yards away, surrounded by a lopsided circle of stones, and tucked behind it, almost hidden by the slope, was a root cellar. No door, just steps leading into darkness. I didn't go down. Took a few pictures, marked the coordinates, and decided I'd leave that hole for someone with a stronger flashlight and worse instincts. Then I turned around and saw her. A woman was standing by my truck, maybe 60 yards back. She wore a long, handmade-looking green coat, thick, quilted fabric, like something your grandmother might make during a long winter. Her gray hair was braided into a single rope down her back. She didn't wave, didn't move. I called out, "Hey ma'am, do you live around here?" She didn't answer, just stared. I walked a few paces toward her and tried again, louder this time. "I'm with the Land Survey Office, just checking out a parcel." Nothing. Then, after a beat, she raised one hand, not a wave, just a flat lift, and said, "You shouldn't go down there alone." Her voice was weirdly calm, clear, like someone leading a children's choir. I asked what she meant. She tilted her head slightly, didn't blink. "They come at night. And they don't speak English." Then she turned and walked straight into the woods. No trail, no hesitation, like she knew exactly where she was going. I stood there long enough for my mouth to go dry. When I finally jogged back to the truck, she was gone. I even checked the tree line, nothing. That night, I stayed at this old roadside place called the Big Buck Lodge. The walls were wood paneling, straight out of a 70s basement. The vending machine only had orange soda and expired trail mix. I wasn't expecting luxury, just a mattress and a lock. Around midnight, I woke up to this low, humming noise. At first, I thought it was the ice machine or maybe the AC kicking on, but then I realized it was rhythmic. Like a chant. Quiet. Almost like it was coming through the walls. I got up and peeked through the curtain. There were 6 people standing at the edge of the parking lot. They wore long white robes, looked like potato sacks with armholes. Their heads were wrapped in gauze or muslin, tightly, like the fabric had been soaked and dried against their faces. The parts over their mouths were stained dark. It wasn't paint. They swayed in sync, back and forth. The chanting didn't sound like any language I knew. Just long vowel sounds, broken and stretched, in ways that didn't feel right. I stood there frozen. Curtain barely cracked until one of them took a single step forward. That tiny movement felt louder than the chant. I backed away from the window and didn't check again for a while. When I finally looked, they were gone. The next morning, I called Tom again and asked about that parcel. He sounded confused. Said the coordinates didn't match anything in the current database. After a few minutes of digging, he found an old notation. Unfit for claim, abandoned religious site. Access discouraged. I asked what abandoned religious site meant. He sighed. Backwoods cult, maybe? Some group got booted off the land back in the 60s. They didn't want roads near it. Locals protested. It got weird. I don't know the whole story. I went back anyway. Brought a flashlight, my pocket knife, and a camcorder I used for documenting unusual terrain features. Honestly, I wasn't sure what I expected to find. Maybe proof I hadn't hallucinated everything? The structure was still there, but the fire pit looked different. Fresh ash, some burned feathers. It hadn't been empty last night. I pointed my flashlight into the cellar. The steps were still clear, leading down into the dark. I started down slowly, one boot at a time. About halfway down, the air changed. It smelled like rust and damp rock. Cold, but not naturally. At the bottom, the space opened up into a larger chamber. Dirt floor, rotting wooden supports. The walls were lined with glass jars. Cloudy, misshapen things floating inside. I didn't look too hard. The symbols drawn into the dirt caught my eye. Loops, spirals, crosses, I didn't recognize. I knelt to inspect one, thinking it was chalk. But when I touched it, it crumbled like dried blood under my fingernail. On the far wall, there was a makeshift altar. Antlers nailed to wood, old rope, a human jawbone wired to a plank. Above it, smeared in something red, were the words, "We gave the tongue to the forest." I raised the camcorder, hands shaking. Then I heard it. Footsteps above me. Slow, deliberate. I turned off the light and pressed against the wall. Shadows passed over the entrance. 5 figures, bare feet, white robes. They didn't come down. They just stood there, blocking the light. Then the chanting began again. Softer this time. Almost like a lullaby in reverse. The kind of sound that makes your stomach twist even though you don't know why. I didn't move, barely breathed. Eventually the chanting stopped, the figures left. When I was sure they were gone, I climbed out. Fast. My truck's tires had been slashed, not flat, just cut deep enough to leak air. I grabbed my pack and limped down the trail until I hit a ranger station with a radio antenna sticking out the roof. The rangers were polite but skeptical. They drove back with me. When we got to the site, the cellar was gone, filled in with fresh dirt. The fire pit had vanished. The clearing looked undisturbed, like it had been for years. I showed them the camcorder. The video was corrupted, just static and bursts of high-pitched screeching, like a modem dying. They exchanged looks. One of them said, "Nobody's lived out here since the 70s. You probably found an old meth camp or scared off some squatters." I quit the job 2 days later. About 2 weeks after that, I came home from my shift at a gas station and found something in my doorframe. A piece of folded paper. No envelope, no name. Inside was a symbol I recognized from the cellar floor. Under it, in small cursive handwriting, was one line: "Speak it and it hears you." That night, I buried the paper in a jar behind my apartment building. I've never said the word, never tried to mimic those sounds.